welcome to Coffee with Cari, and the reading continues of my new book. For those of you following along, we're on page 45, and this is a particularly fascinating topic to me, so I hope you're finding it as interesting as well. Other hazards and poisons. The Psychiatric Quarterly of 1960 states, in the Free Pentecostal Holiness Church, poisonous rattlesnakes and copperheads are handled without fatalities. Flames and flaming coals are handled during ecstasy without injury to body or clothing. And strychnine is ingested in toxic doses without harmful effects. Again, belief, their level of consciousness, is the central characteristic that closes the biological field to harm entering the cells of those Pentecostal followers. Firewalking. How is it that people can walk long distances, almost the length of half a football field according to the Guinness World Records, on coals that are anywhere from between 1600 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit without burning their feet? Indeed, there are many cultures in which firewalking has been practiced safely as part of ceremonial rituals for centuries. It's the power of their belief that protects them, their level of consciousness, vibrational frequency producing a suitable biology, and a matching powerful energy field. Thoughts can overpower trauma. My friend, the Egyptian princess. The first time my friend and I walked together, I couldn't help but exclaim at her beautiful way of walking. The moment we set off, her spine straightened, her legs swung rhythmically, and she almost glided. I told her, "You walk like an Egyptian princess." Little did I know at the time what my words meant to her. I found out later that over 40 years previously, as a young woman in her 20s, she had been assaulted by a gang of young men and left with a severely injured hip and leg sticking out at right angles. Doctors told her she was unlikely to ever walk normally, and she would never dance again. She couldn't afford medical treatment, but she said she intuitively knew how to help her body heal. Anytime she walked, she would envisage, walking in front of her, a skeleton with its straight spine and hips swinging perfectly. Then she would mimic this movement as best she could. Over and over, she gave her brain this image of how to walk, and her brain complied. Today, she not only walks normally, but she can also dance. It's nowhere near my heart. I'll be fine. My hobby is natural building, and many years ago, I was leading a workshop building a cob cottage high up in a gorgeous canyon in New Mexico, in the same place where I lead my annual retreats. P.S. You can watch the documentaries I've made on natural building on YouTube. A local lad, not yet 20, came up to help us harvest 2 trees for roof beams. He was working with a chainsaw when it came down onto his leg, cutting a gash through his jeans just above his right knee. It was deep and bleeding badly. All I wanted to do was to get him to hospital, but he was having none of that. He took off his cap and made a tourniquet around his leg with his perspiration-soaked bandana. He told me with 100% conviction, "Don't worry, ma'am, it's nowhere near my heart. And my dad always says that if it's nowhere near your heart, you're going to be just fine." With that, he continued to work as if nothing had happened. Nothing would persuade him to stop or seek medical help. His certainty that he would heal up just fine was immovable. Think about the message his cells were receiving. "I know you're busy healing me." 3 days later, still convinced he would need medical help, I sought him out. To my absolute amazement, it seemed almost impossible The gash had closed and was healing fine, with no sign of infection. He'd commanded, and his body had responded. Dr. Joe Dispenza's traumatic accident. In April 1986, when he was 23, newly qualified chiropractor Dr. Joe Dispenza was taking part in a triathlon in Palm Springs. He was on the event's biking portion when a red Bronco slammed into him, leaving him with 6 broken vertebrae and compression fractures, a kinked spine, and shattered bone fragments impacting on his spinal cord. Doctors said that if he was to have a chance of ever walking again, he needed surgery that entailed cutting out parts of his vertebra and screwing 2 12-inch stainless steel rods along both sides of his spinal column. Ignoring the advice that without surgery paralysis seemed certain, Joe focused instead on harnessing the inevitable intelligence and healing powers he knew his body possessed. Lying face down, over and over, he would give his body a vision with very specific healing orders, while continually blocking out any doubtful or limiting thoughts. He surrendered his healing to this greater intelligence. In just short of 10 weeks, without any surgeries, he reached full recovery. Decades later, Dr. Joe walks normally and reports having little to no pain. Do you see that when you can command your brain, it commands your cells, and that you can effect remarkable healings if you just believe you can? The problem is that we've been taught we need doctors and hospitals and pills and potions in order to heal. We've never been taught about the power of our internal pharmacy. And one of the projects that I run on the side is a not-for-profit called the Addy Project. And this arose out of a time when I was actually working on Your Body Song, but I wasn't able to download it. And I looked across the road and saw a dumpster. And as I saw it, I was thinking, what am I going to do with the 2 months that I've put aside to actually write this book? Well, as it happened, the dumpster triggered a thought. I had seen a woman doing or creating a fairy house on a YouTube channel, and I thought, well, while I've got all this time on my hands, I might as well make a fairy house. So I dug in the dumpster, took out some plastic bottles and some cardboard and some egg cartons, and set about making this little house. Turns out I not only loved the house, I also loved making them, and I thought, gosh, I need to make a lot more of these houses. But what does one do with many fairy houses? I had just had that thought when my neighbor back in Washington, I was actually in Spain at the time, texted me to let me know that the other neighbor's daughter, who was struggling with cystic fibrosis, had died. And instantly I knew what I had to do with those houses. I had to build more of them and send them to children with big diagnoses, because all of these houses light up from the inside. And when I think about lighting up from the inside, I think about how we can switch on our inner pharmacy. And so I spent the 2 months that I had put aside to write this book, writing a different book called How to Kickstart Your Inner Rainbow. And that's the book that's the children's version of Your Body Song. And it goes with these houses, along with a healing elf helper, to children with big diagnoses like cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis, leukemia, cancer, etc. Because it puts them in a place where they can actually help turn on their inner pharmacy in the same way that my Egyptian princess friend did, the same way that Dr. Joe Dispenza did, the same way that those babushkas of Chernobyl did. And when we start teaching children at a young age that they have the power to change their biology, they don't feel as helpless. They love to know that they can be a part of their own healing instead of just relying on doctors, hospitals, surgeries, and medication. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget you can get my book off Amazon and join me for the next reading of Coffee with Cari.